Well, hello. My name is Rebecca Halm, and I'm a storyteller. So, this is the Red Lion, the RL Living Stage out of Olympia, Washington, here on Tuesday night, February 21st. Now, February 26th is National Fairy Tale Day. And so I thought tonight I'd tell you a fairy tale. Now, most fairy tales, they come from Europe, but this one comes from down south. It's a Cajun folk tale, fairy tale. You might kind of recognize it, parts of it. And so, fairy tales, you need to remember, fairy tales isn't about them being, fantastical and untrue. There are fantastic things that happen in a fairy tale, but the whole point is that it's metaphor. All of these stories for hundreds and hundreds of years, past all the centuries, these stories were told as a metaphor to teach a little bit of history, to teach a little bit of social behavior, and to comment on life and how people behave. So, walk with me into a story from down south. Now, Rose and Blanche, they lived with their mama there on the edge of the swamp. Oh, Rose was as good as the day was long. I mean, that girl worked from sun up to sundown. Oh, she told the lines. Oh, that girl, she hoed the fields. She fed the chickens. She picked the beans and pulled the strings off of them. She shelled out the peas. She cooked the dinner. That girl worked till she was bone tired. Now, Blanche, well, Blanche and Mama, they were like two peas in a pod. They were mean-spirited and sharp-tongued. They'd sit there all day on the porch, fanning themselves and talking about how they were going to go into the city one day and be the fine ladies that they were always meant to be. All the time while Rose is out there, bone weary and dirty dusty. Now, one day, as Mama and Blanche sat there on the porch, Blanche said, "Oh, Mama, I am so thirsty. I'm near to dying from thirst." And Mama said, Rose, you go down there, grab up that bucket. You go on down to the well, and you get your sister some clean, clear, cool water." "Yes, Mama," said Rose. And she grabbed up the bucket and she went running down the road, down the trail, there to the well. And Rose, she put the bucket down the well and she was pulling up a fresh, cool, clean, clear bucket of water when an old woman came walking up the trail from behind her. The old woman said, "Child, my throat is dry, parched. Could I have a sip of that water?" And Rose said, "Well, of course, Auntie." And so she scooped her up a gourd full of that cool water, and the woman sipped it down. "Oh," she said, "that is some cool water. Could I have some more?" And Rose, she took the gourd from the old woman and she dipped up another gourd full of water and handed it to the old woman. And the woman drank it down. She looked at Rose and she said, "Child, that is some sweet, sweet water there. You know, I think you got the spirit of do-right in your heart. I think things are going to go very well for you." "Oh, well, thank you, Auntie, but Mama and Blanche, they're waiting for me back at the cabin, and so I need to get running back there. It was a real pleasure meeting you." And so Rose, she took off back up the trail, back to Mama and Blanche. Now, when she got there, she served up a gourd full of water to Blanche, and Blanche spit it out. She said, "Well, this water's so warm it's near to boiling. What are you trying to do to me?" And Mama said, Rose, can't you do any one thing right? I told you to go get this for your sister. I said clean, clear, and cool. And what do? You come back like that? Where have you been? What have you been doing?" And Mama, she grabbed up a switch. In all of her anger, she grabbed up a switch and she started running after Rose there, and switching her on her legs, down there on the bottom of her calves. Oh, and Rose, she started crying and she ran off away back down that trail. Oh, yeah. Now, Rose ran right back to the well, and then she sat down there sobbing, just her heart near to breaking, because she never seemed to be able to do anything that could please her mama right. And just when she had her head in her hands and she thought that the day was going to end like that, she heard that voice. The old auntie, the old lady was back again, and the old woman said, "Child, what's happened? What's making you cry so?" Rose said, Oh, Auntie, Mama got so mad at me for taking so long, and then she started switching me on my legs, and I never seem to be able to make her pleased with me. No matter what I do, I just don't know what's ever going to be enough. And she broke into sobs again. And the old auntie, that auntie, she put her hand there on Rose's back and she said, There, child. There, child. Don't you fuss. I tell you what. This one time, just for this one night, you can come with me to my cabin. But just this one time. And then in the morning, we'll see what we see. Now, I wouldn't suggest these days and times that a child would ever go running off with even an old auntie like me when you don't know her. But this was another time and another place, and Rose felt like she didn't have any options. And that old woman had maybe the spirit to do right in her too. And so Rose followed that old woman there through the brambles and the brush. And as they walked, the brambles and the brush, they seemed to just like open up right in front of them and then close back behind them again. Now, when they were partway there to the cabin, the old woman said, "Now, child, there's one thing I've got to demand from you before we go any further. Now, when you come to my place, you're going to see some things that might look a bit peculiar. But you got to promise me, no matter what, that you won't laugh at what you see." And Rose said, "Well, okay, Auntie, I promise I won't laugh." And so they walked on. Now, when they came close to the old woman's cabin, the first thing they saw there was a cow that was all spotted. But the strangest thing was that cow had horns coming out all which way from the top of her head. I mean, there were curlicue horns, there were bowed horns, and there was even a unicorn horn coming straight out of the middle. Okay? And Rose looked at that cow, and then all of a sudden, that cow went, "Ew, ew." Well, yes. Oh, but Rose did not laugh. No, she did not. Instead, Rose said, "My, I've never seen such a creature before. She is mighty interesting." And they walked on. The old woman looked at Rose and said, yes, yes, child." Now, when they got a little bit closer, what did she see but a flock of chickens? I mean, there were purple chickens, there were orange chickens, there were pink chickens, there were polka-dotted chickens. And all Rose said was, "I bet they lay some right beautiful eggs, those chickens do." But she didn't laugh. And the old woman, Now, they got to the cabin, and the old woman, she put on a pot of water to boil. And then she threw in an old dried up bone in the pot. And then she handed Rose a single grain of rice. And Rose started to grind it up. And sure enough, there was rice coming out, pouring out all over. And the woman threw some of that rice into the pot. And soon, there was boiling up the most thick, savory, sumptuous stew that you ever could imagine. And they sat down, Rose and that old auntie, and they ate their fill. It was a fine supper. When they were finished and tidied up, the old woman said, "Child, it's a mighty fine moonlighty night out there. Let's go out and enjoy the evening." And so Rose and the old woman, they went out and they sat on the back porch and they listened to the cicadas starting to hum and the other night birds starting to sing. Yes, yes. And then, out of the corner of her eye, Rose saw the strangest thing. She saw these rabbits coming there into the yard. Well, but these were no ordinary rabbits. I mean, these rabbits were walking upright, and these rabbits had on, the lady rabbits, beautiful, long, trail-trained dresses. Oh, yes, and the gentleman rabbits, well, they were wearing their frock-tail coats. And then one of those rabbits started playing the fiddle, and they all began to dance. I mean, they danced the two-step, they danced the waltz, and they even did a fox trot. Rabbits are good at that, you know. Well, Rose, she sat there thinking this was one of the most marvelous evenings she had ever had in her life. She was clapping her hands and tapping her toes, enjoying the music, enjoying the splendor, until she laid her head down on the auntie's lap, and there she fell asleep in the moonlight with the music playing and those fine, fine rabbits dancing. The old woman carried her into bed and tucked her in with an old quilt. And all night long, Rose slept so sweet, and she had the finest dreams of music and moonshiny nights and fine rabbits. In the morning, Rose went up to go milk that multi-horned cow. She went up there, she milked that cow, and it gave her a bucketful of the sweetest cream that you ever tasted. Oh, and so they had some mighty fine cream in their coffee for breakfast. And after they were finished, and after they had eaten, the old woman looked at Rose, and she said, "Child, I do think things are going to go right for you, and so I have something. Now you take up that basket there, and you go on down to the hen house, and you go in, all right? You go into that hen house, and any of the eggs that talk to you, any of the eggs that say, 'Take me,' well, you go ahead and you take those eggs. But any eggs that say, 'Don't take me,' well, you leave those eggs be. You don't take them." And so Rose, she grabbed up the basket and she went running on down the trail there to the hen house, and she opened up the door, and there in front of her, there were dozens and dozens and dozens of eggs. Now, the plain old brown eggs and green eggs and white eggs, they all said, "Take me, take me." But there in some of the nests, there were the finest eggs. I mean, some of them were silver eggs. Some of them had diamonds on them, rubies, emeralds. Some of them were as blue as topaz. Some of them were so fine that Rose thought, if I had just one of those eggs, just one, it would be the finest thing I'd ever had in my life. My life might change if I could have just one. And she reached out, but she didn't take it. "Don't take me. Don't take me," all the fine eggs cried. And so Rose, she put the plain old eggs in the basket, and they all called out, "Take me, take me." And so that's what she did. And then she went on back up to the old lady's cabin, and the old lady said, "Now, child, I see what you did. I see that you did it right, just like I told you. Now, I want you to take that trail, and you head on for home. But as you're walking along, you take the eggs one by one, and you toss them over your shoulder, and then you'll see what you'll see. Be well, child. You got the spirit to do right." And so Rose, "Thank you, Auntie. I can never repay you for all this kindness." And then, with a wave goodbye and a happy smile, Rose, she went trotting on down the trail. And one by one, she started to throw those eggs over her shoulder. And out of each egg would come something so fine. Now, out of the first one, there was a beautiful, fine, green silk dress with a long trail train. And out of the second one, there were a little pair of satin dancing shoes. And all of that fit Rose just perfectly. Oh, how beautiful. And then out of another egg, there was some earrings and some fine bracelets and jewelry. Oh, and one of them even had a tiara on it. Oh, Rose could not believe what she was seeing. And there were only 2 eggs left now. She threw one over her shoulder, and out came a little red cart. Oh, so small, like the size of a matchbox. But then it started to get larger and larger and larger until it was a full-size, beautiful cart with white spoked wheels. Oh, and out of that very last egg, well, what do you think came but a little brown and white pony that was no bigger than a cricket. But then it started to grow and grow larger and larger and larger until it was big enough that Rose could hook it up to that cart. Oh, yes, and she put all of her fine things there inside the cart. She climbed up on the seat and she sat there behind her pony, up on her cart, and she headed for home. Now, when she came there to her mama's house there by the edge of the swamp, Mama, sure enough, she noticed all of this that Rose was bringing home. But, you know, that Mama, she didn't say anything about it at all. She didn't comment on it. Instead, she said, "Oh, Rose, darling, I've just been worried sick about you all night long. I wondered and worried about where you were and what had happened to you. Why don't you come up here? You come up here on the porch and you sit down. See, you sit down. Blanche, you go get your sister some cold lemonade, all right? And make sure it's cold now." Now, Mama had never treated Rose with that much kindness ever that Rose could remember. But sure enough, all day long, Mama had Rose sitting up there on the porch just rocking and fanning away. And Blanche was the one that had to go out and do all the chores, you know, to hoe down the rows and pick the beans and string them out and pick the peas and feed the chickens. And oh. Blanche complained the whole time about why do I have to do Rose's work. And Mama said, hush, we'll talk about this later. Finally, it was time for supper. And Mama cooked it. Rose could not remember the last time that it had been Mama that was cooking supper for her. Oh, but she sat down and enjoyed the meal. And then, after they had eaten, then Mama said, "Rose, darling, I just couldn't help but notice all those fine things that you brought back with you, and I just couldn't help but wonder where you got all of those fine things. It must have been quite something." And Rose told Mama and Blanche the whole story about meeting the woman down at the well and giving her water and then running back down there again, and then the old woman taking her to the cabin and the things that she had seen and how she had spent the night, and then the woman had given her the eggs, and there you were, all those fine things. And Mama said, my child, that is just something fantastic. It's almost beyond belief, huh? Yes, huh? Well, child, you must be just exhausted after such an adventure like that. So why don't you just get cuddled in and snuggle down for bed now? And Mama tucked her in. Rose didn't remember the last time that had ever happened in her life. Now, after Rose was sound asleep and breathing steady, Mama grabbed up Blanche by the shoulders and said, Girl, wake up. Now, Blanche, you listen to me. Tomorrow, you're going to go down to that well, and you're going to meet the old woman, and you're going to go with her, and you're going to get those same fine things for yourself. Well, Mama, why can't we just take Rose's stuff? Child, hush. There isn't enough there for the both of us. You go and do what I tell you. You get some stuff for yourself, and then the two of us, we will go into the city, and we will be the fine ladies that we have always been meant to be. And so, the next morning, Blanche grabbed up the bucket, and all drag foot she went on down there to the well, and she pulled up a bucket of water, and sure enough, just when she did, there comes the old auntie. And you know, the old auntie says to her, "Well, child, I'm nearly parched and so dry thirsty. Could I have a sip of your water?" And Blanche grabbed up the gourd, and she said, "Well, yes." And she almost threw it at the old lady, and the water spilled all over her. The old woman took a sip and said, "That is some bitter water, child," and handed the gourd back to her. She didn't ask for seconds. Blanche said, "Well, you know, I think that you met my sister Rose yesterday, and she was telling me about that pretty place that you have off there in the woods, and so I was wondering, could I go with you to go see this place?" The old woman looked at Blanche and, "Well, yes, child, yes, I'll take you to see my place. You follow on behind me." And so the old woman led the way there through the brush and the brambles, and instead of it opening up and letting them walk through, when Blanche came through, those brambles seemed like they reached out to grab her legs and scratch her across the calves. Oh, and tear at her dress and pull at her hem. Oh. The old woman walked on, and Blanche had to run to keep up and struggling through it all. When they were nearly there, the old woman, she turned around and she said, "Now, child, there's one thing I have to ask of you before you come to my place. I have to demand that no matter what you see, even if it looks a bit peculiar, that you don't laugh." And Blanche said, yes, I won't laugh. The old woman, and they walked on. Now, when Blanche saw that cow with all those curlicue horns, those bow horns, that unicorn horn coming out the front of its head, and then when she heard it, Blanche, look at that. You are the ugliest beast with the ugliest voice that I have ever seen. Oh, that old woman looked at Blanche and thought, no. Then when Blanche saw that flock of chickens, you remember them? Yeah, the purple chickens, the pink chickens, orange chickens, polka dotted chickens. Yeah. Blanche said, what do? Lay square eggs? They're the most peculiar, oddest chickens I've ever seen. They probably come out hard-boiled or something, you know. And the old woman, Now, when they got to the house, and that same old thing with the dried-up bone and that one little grain of rice, Blanche looked at the bone and said, well, this isn't even fit for a hound dog, and threw it out the window. And the grain of rice, yeah, that isn't going to be nothing. Grain of rice. What kind of nonsense you think you're showing me? And the old woman, and I'm telling you, they had a mighty thin soup for supper. And there was no music out there in the yard that night. There were no cicadas singing. There were no night birds with their evening song. Nope, nope, nope. Blanche went to bed hungry. And all night long, she heard scritching and scratching in the walls. And an owl hoop, 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 hooting right outside her window. And Blanche had some of the most frightening dreams that she'd ever had in her life. The next morning, the old woman said, "All right, child, you go up and get some milk for our morning coffee." Well, Blanche went up there. She laughed at that cow so bad that the cow only gave her sour milk, and there was no cream in that morning's coffee. And then Blanche said, "All right, I'm done with you, old woman. I want what my sister had, and you're going to give it to me, and you're going to give it to me right now." And the old woman said, "I will give you, just to be rid of you. You take that basket right there, and you go on down to the hen house. And the eggs that say, 'Take me,' well, you go ahead, you take those eggs, child. Just take them and be gone with you. But the eggs that say, 'Don't take me,' now, I'm warning you, you do not take those eggs." And Blanche says, yes. And she grabbed the basket and she ran on down to the hen house. She opened the door and there she saw dozens and dozens of eggs. But it was all the plain eggs, the brown eggs, green eggs, white eggs that were all saying, "Take me, take me." And you know, it was all of those fine, fancy eggs that were saying, "Don't take me. Don't take me." And Blanche, she looked at them and she said, "Psh, I know that old woman is just trying to trick me. She is trying to keep what I deserve away from me. And so I know that the fine things are in those fancy eggs. Fancy things, fancy eggs. Plain eggs, they're just going to be plain." And so Blanche, she gathered up so many of those fine, fancy eggs. She filled up her basket until it was overflowing. And then she grabbed it up and she went running on down the trail without so much as a "Thank you kindly" to the old woman. And she started throwing them eggs as fast as she could, one after the other, out behind her. And out came, a ball of snakes rolling along behind her. And out came a swarm of bees chasing after her. And out came an alligator nipping at her heels. Oh, and Blanche, she called out, "Mama!" And she went running there through the swamp. Now, Mama heard her, and Mama went running out, looking for her. And Rose sat there waiting, and she took care of the place for a day, 2 days, 3 days, for a week. And then finally, Rose packed up all of her fine things into that little red cart, and behind her little brown and white pony, she sat up on the seat and she drove it on in to the city. And Rose became the fine lady that she had always been meant to be. Now, sometime later, Mama and Blanche, they came dragging back through the woods, all torn and tattered and bruised and battered. And they spent the rest of their days looking for that old woman back out there in the woods. But they never could find her again. The end. Thank you very much. Enjoy Fairy Tale Day and make up some of your own. Thank you. I'm Rebecca Hom. I'm a storyteller.